I didn't go out there to find anything. I went to get away from people, mostly from the emails piling up, from the low buzz of city living that never quite lets you rest. I needed quiet, stillness, and I figured the Cascades would give me that. My name's Evan. I was 28 then, and I'd been doing nature photography for 6 years, mostly freelance. You name it, bears in Denali, redwoods in California, desert storms in Arizona. I'd probably sat in the dirt somewhere trying to capture it, but I'd never been to this section of the Cascades before. Not this deep. And I liked that. Fewer trails, fewer people, fewer stories. Just open forest and the kind of silence that you forget exists when you live with your phone always on vibrate. I planned the trip for months. I studied topographic maps, weather patterns, even wild animal migration routes. I wasn't just going to wander into the woods like some weekend hiker. I had gear, knowledge, and a genuine respect for places like this. Places that don't care whether you're careful or not. The logging road that led in was barely drivable. My Jeep groaned through every rut and dip, the suspension complaining, and I could hear pine branches scraping the sides like the trees themselves didn't want me there. Eventually, the road just stopped. Dead end, gravel faded to moss and pine needles. I parked beneath a cluster of western hemlocks and checked my pack one last time. The hike in was brutal. About 3 miles of uneven terrain, all of it tangled with deadfall and waist-high underbrush. No real trail, just instinct and a compass. But when I reached the valley I'd marked on my map, it opened up like something out of a dream. The trees bowed inward like they were guarding the space. A narrow creek twisted through the center, catching the late afternoon sun and breaking it into glints across the water. Everything smelled alive. Damp earth, pine sap, and something clean that I swear you can only find when you're far from civilization. I set up camp just above the waterline. Flat ground, a soft patch of moss, a spot for the fire. The essentials. I'm not one for overcomplicating things. A tent, some dehydrated meals, and my camera gear. That's all I needed. By sundown, I was relaxed. Genuinely. I sat by the fire, cleaning my lenses and reviewing a few test shots, light filtering through moss-covered limbs, a hawk mid-flight, even caught a buck in the distance. It felt like maybe the silence was exactly what I needed. Until it wasn't. It started with the whistling. Around 9 p.m., just after I'd added a couple logs to the fire. Soft at first. One of those simple melodies that kids hum when they're bored. 3 or 4 notes, rising and falling in a lazy loop. It came from somewhere behind me up the slope. I froze, not because I was scared exactly, just confused. This was deep country. No trails, no campsites, no one else should have been out there. I called out, "Hello?" Nothing. I waited, ears straining. A minute passed, then the same tune again, this time from the opposite direction. That's when I stood up. The sound wasn't random. It wasn't a bird. I know the difference between natural and not, and this was deliberate. Someone was moving out there, slow and steady, circling. The same song, the same pace. Like they wanted me to know they were there but didn't want to be seen. I picked up my flashlight and swept it through the trees. Nothing. Just trunks and shadows and the flicker of firelight against damp bark. Then footsteps. Just a few at first, crunching through the underbrush. They weren't the careful kind that hikers make when they're trying not to fall. These were measured. Heavy. Almost rhythmic. They paced for a while back and forth at the tree line, never stepping into the open. I'd sweep my light in one direction and the sound would stop. Then it would pick up behind me again. This went on for over an hour. I spoke aloud more than once. "I don't want any trouble. I'm just here taking pictures. I'll leave in the morning." I even said my name, like it might matter to someone or something that was deliberately staying out of sight. Eventually, the whistling stopped. The footsteps too. The only thing that remained was this vacuum of silence. The woods went dead. No rustling, no owls. Even the water sounded quieter somehow, like the whole forest was holding its breath. Then I saw them. 3 shapes, at the edge of the clearing, just beyond the reach of the firelight. Not close enough to see faces, but close enough that I could tell they were human, or at least shaped like it. They didn't move, they didn't speak. Just stood there, shoulder-width apart, watching. I don't know how long I stared back. Maybe a minute, maybe longer. My skin prickled so bad it hurt. I wasn't sure if I was supposed to run, scream, or just pretend I hadn't noticed. I grabbed a piece of wood and threw it on the fire. Flames jumped, casting more light into the dark. For a second, I could see them better. One stood directly across from me, the other two flanking, spread out just far enough to box me in. That's when I noticed something even worse. They didn't blink, didn't shift their weight, didn't react to the light at all. I lifted my camera, not to shoot, just out of habit, like maybe capturing them would make this real, would anchor me. But the moment I moved, they backed away in perfect sync, disappearing into the trees like they'd never been there. I didn't sleep. I stoked that fire until sunrise, watching every shadow and listening to every gust of wind like it was whispering something I didn't want to hear. My nerves frayed so badly that I started shaking if I heard even a pine cone drop. When daylight finally showed up, I tore camp down in record time. I didn't even make coffee, didn't eat, just packed and started hiking out like something was right behind me. It wasn't until I was halfway back to the Jeep that I realized I'd left my SD card case behind. Dozens of shots. Gone. It crushed me, but I wasn't turning back. I told myself it didn't matter, that I didn't want those pictures anymore anyway. But the truth, that whatever I'd seen would still be standing there, watching, waiting for me to come back. I haven't returned to that valley since, haven't even opened the coordinates again. I still photograph the wild, but now I stay on the beaten path. Campgrounds, rangers, the comfort of other people being nearby. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd approached them, if I'd stepped into the tree line and called their bluff. But then I remember how quiet the forest went, like it knew something I didn't. I always thought backpacking was about solitude. Just me, my pack, and a trail leading somewhere far from cell towers and traffic noise. That's exactly why I headed into Northern California in June 2020, chasing a stretch of the Pacific Crest Trail that nearly everyone avoids. Sparse water, intense elevation, and no guarantee anyone else would pass through. Perfect, I thought. My name's Eli, by the way. At that point, I was 25, working remote gigs part-time so I could afford these long treks. I wasn't expecting anything dramatic. No bears, no forest ghosts, just a reset and maybe a few good photos. I'd backpacked most of the PCT in sections, but this patch, near Miller's Creek, I'd heard whispers about. Tough terrain, bottleneck passes, and then nothing. Drought had chewed the flow to a dried bed when I arrived. Day 3, I crested the final ridge and followed the map downhill. My pack felt lighter with water gone, and a heat wave had bleached everything to a sun-worn pale. The creek bed was a dusty scar bordered by oak and manzanita. I let out a long breath. No good camping spots right by the water, so I chose a flat patch about 50 yards up, a slight rise that let me see any movement. Safe. Sensible. Dinner was ramen cup noodles with freeze-dried veggies. While rehydrating, my head kept drifting to the ground below. I'd noticed them earlier, rock stacks. Cairns, stacked and balanced, scattered across the creek bed like silent sentinels. In trail-heavy areas, cairns marked the way. But here there was no path. The stacks formed a rough circle around what would have been the creek's deepest pool. Some were 10 inches high, others went over 3 feet. A few even looked professionally built. It was like someone had carved out their own spiritual center. That's what unsettled me. We're taught to see cairns as helpful, but these felt intentional in a different way, calibrated, balanced precisely. I walked around them slowly, tracing a finger along cool stone. They stood stiff in the fading light, a deliberate shape poking out from wilderness. I took photos, inspected the base of each. No unnatural footprints, no nudged dirt. Someone built these meticulously and left without a trace. I could tell by the dust patterns and intact joints that none had been touched in a while, except the one in the center, which looked recently rebuilt. This didn't feel like a simple discouragement to erosion. It felt like a statement. Night fell quickly in the shade of the oak trees. Stars came out early, burning bright in the clear sky. I zipped into my tent with earplugs already in. It was cold and the wind picked up in the open creek bed. Everything felt too quiet. The usual nighttime forest sounds were missing. No rustling squirrels, no owl calls, not even crickets. It was like pulling the plug on background noise. My breath sounded too loud in my ears as I listened for the softer creaks of wood or brush. I told myself it's just the wind, just the isolation. It's fine. But then it began, a soft tapping, the kind of distinct sound stones make when they click together. Click. Twice. Pause. Click, click. And again, my heart jolted. Not mechanical, not consistent, but thoughtful, stone hitting stone, deliberate. I froze, breathing shallow so wind wouldn't jostle my ear canal. I didn't move. I listened. It repeated a few feet from where I pitched, around the creekbed area deeper in. My head swung toward the flap. The faint moonlight spilled across the ground. I cracked the flap just enough to see outside. Through the opening, I made a silhouette emerge. Someone crouched, working carefully, adding to a cairn or balancing a new stone. They paused, bent over shifting rock, adjusting it precisely, then leaned forward to another stack. Click! I couldn't see details, clothing, gender, face, just a dark form in the pale light, methodical, deliberate. My instincts screamed, leave. But curiosity held me in place. I stayed so long, the cold got sharp, my toes curled in socks, cold stone seeping through the tent floor. I considered shouting, hey, but what would they do? Same as me, retreat and vanish somehow, and then come back. The tapping moved backward, click, click in a different spot. I thought I heard a soft scrape against the ground, the whisper of a foot sliding. They were moving around the outer edge. I squeezed my flashlight with one hand, the other fisted the tent zipper. Shining it directly would expose me, so I fanned a wide beam across a stack of oak near the creek. Nothing. Maybe a flash across stones. But just the wind tossing a leaf. Time bled on. I heard no voice, no human rustle besides those clicks. Maybe 10 minutes, maybe the whole night. I lost track. By 3 a.m., I thought I heard a rainstorm or heavy wind rise. The air snapped cold and quiet. Then absolute quiet. No taps, no footsteps, no movement whatsoever. My heart hammered. I sat there until the sky shifted toward dawn, unable to fall asleep. That sunrise felt holy. I rubbed my hands together, slowly unzipped the tent. The creek bed looked softer, minerals sparkling where dew slept in dips. I walked back to the cairn circle. Each tower had grown. Every single one was at least half again its height. New stones stacked in unexpected places, shapes more complex. The central altar was now 6 feet tall, stooped and irregular in silhouette. Some of the stones clustered around it were carved, lines, spirals, glyph-like cracks radiating from a center. Hard to describe. Could have been erosion, but every symbol was deliberate. Someone had taken time by moonlight and carved rock. Must have been hours of work. The sense of trespass washed over me. I took only handheld shots, no tripod. Too nervous. It felt wrong on so many levels. I didn't want more evidence of this presence, didn't want to write about it in a journal. Everything felt too alive. But the physical remnants were undeniable. Fresh, intentional, terrifying in their stillness. I packed up fast. No coffee, no breakfast, just the ache of adrenaline leaving and my legs starting to burn from cold shock. I chose a less obvious route, a faint game trail off to the east that looked like it slid deeper into forest. I walked for hours, exhausted but alert. The calm forest around me felt strangely ordinary in contrast to what I'd just seen. Back near town, I filed a report with the Forest Service. I expected polite interest, maybe an RSO check-in. Instead, the ranger nodded and took it seriously, asking for photos and location data. "We haven't had reports like this," he said, voice calm. "We'll check it out." I appreciated the response, but something clamped around my chest. I wasn't sure I wanted anyone else out there, stirring whatever energy was alive in that stone ring. 2 years later, I still don't know what followed me out. I still avoid that trail section. Sometimes when I'm reviewing landscapes at home, my eye catches stacked stones, and I feel a shiver through my spine. It's not hiker-made, it's something else. Something that builds silently at night. And though I chose to destroy the photos, erase the memory of each carving and click, I still feel it in the pause before I fall asleep, like a presence circling outside your dream, working by moonlight, building something for reasons beyond explanation. That's not wilderness peace. That's wilderness possession. It wasn't a hiker, not hikers. It was somebody else, someone who expected solitude and used it to build something I wasn't invited to see. And that's enough to break you quietly, long after you leave the trail. That night changed me, not because I couldn't sleep, because afterward, I couldn't forget. Last November, something shifted in how I think about the woods, how I move through them, how I breathe in that particular kind of silence only remote land offers. I used to believe that silence was peaceful, but now, I think silence can be full of teeth. My name's Nate, and I'm not new to the backcountry. But nothing prepares you for when the place you thought you knew suddenly feels like it's watching you back. It started like any other trip. My uncle, Rich, he's one of those old school guys who doesn't trust anything with a battery unless it's running a truck, had been talking about getting one more good hunt in before winter set in. I'd grown up tagging along with him through the Ozark since I was 15, and now in my 30s, it was less about the deer and more about just being out there with him. It's hard to explain if you haven't had a figure like that in your life. Someone who teaches you how to see in a way that's quieter than speech. We drove in early, 2 hours past cell service, up into the high parts of the Ozark Mountains where the trails are more suggestion than direction. We hiked another 2 hours after that, packs heavy with gear and canned chili. Finally setting up camp on a ridge we'd returned to again and again over the years. It overlooks this narrow valley we always called the Pocket because of how it's tucked into the hills like it was folded into the landscape. It was exactly as we remembered. Cold in the morning, warmer by noon, and wrapped in that crisp air that smells like pine needles and damp earth. The wind moved through the trees in slow waves, and even the birds seemed to speak in hushed tones. Rich and I split up for the day, as we usually did, agreeing to meet back at camp before sundown. Day 1 and 2 passed quietly. We tracked a few does, saw fresh scat, heard the bugle of an elk farther off. Rich got a good shot at a buck but missed. He laughed it off, said he was getting old. We cooked over the fire and passed around a flask of rye like it was some sacred thing. That kind of quiet satisfaction you only get out there when the stars are so close they feel heavy. But day 3, it didn't feel right from the start. I don't say that lightly. I've been through storms in these woods, had black bears sniff my tent, even slipped down a ridge and had to hike back with a twisted ankle once. This was different. Not loud, dangerous, just wrong. I went deeper into the valley that morning. There's this spot about a mile south with an old salt lick where deer tend to come through. The light there hits between 9 and 11 a.m. in these long, slanted streaks. I didn't make it that far. About halfway down, I stopped. There was this massive oak, one I'm certain I've passed before, but I'd never seen it marked the way it was now. Carved into the bark were symbols. Dozens of them. Not initials or smiley faces like you sometimes find. These were patterns, spirals inside triangles, overlapping circles, runic shapes I couldn't place. Some were carved deep enough to leak sap. Others looked almost burned into the bark, blackened at the edges. It didn't look like kids messing around. It looked ritualistic, like someone had used that tree for something, ongoing. My gut told me to turn around. I should have listened, but I didn't. I took out my phone, snapped some pictures. For some reason, I didn't speak. Didn't call out, even though that's usually second nature when you spot something strange. I felt like I wasn't supposed to. Back at camp, Rich didn't say much when I showed him. He held my phone for a long time, brows drawn in like he was trying to remember something that kept slipping out of reach. Finally, he just said, "Never seen anything like that." And coming from him, that was a red flag. We built up the fire early that night, ate quietly, no stories, no jokes, just the crackle of flames and the slow drip of cold setting in. Around 9:30, Rich looked at me across the fire and said, "We should take turns on watch tonight." I nodded. We didn't need to say why. I took first shift, 10 to 2, fire low, rifle across my lap, boots laced tight. At first, it was normal. The woods had their usual rhythm, branches creaking, the faint hoot of an owl, dry leaves whispering as they skittered across the ridge. Then around midnight, I heard something different. Chanting. It was soft, barely more than the wind at first. But the cadence was unmistakable. Low voices, multiple, rising and falling in this eerie synchrony. Not a language I could place, maybe not even a language. More like sound arranged to feel like meaning. I froze. Tilted my head. It was coming from the valley below. Not loud, not close, but real. I woke Rich. He sat up without asking questions, listened for a long time, then whispered, "We wait." The chanting went on for maybe 20 minutes. Then it just stopped. No tapering off. Just cut. I couldn't sleep after that. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined that sound weaving through the trees. I kept thinking of those carvings, of that tree like it had been rewritten. Rich took the second watch, and I drifted in and out of these shallow, breathless dreams where I was back at the tree, but it was bleeding. the bark soft like skin. At 4 a.m., he shook me hard. "Get up," he hissed. "We're leaving." His tone didn't invite argument. I sat up, heart already pounding. "What is it?" He didn't answer, just pointed. Down in the valley, the trees were moving. Not the branches, the space between them. I squinted. It took a second, then I saw them. Figures. They moved slowly, methodically, maybe a dozen or more. No lights, no talking, just weaving between the trunks like they'd done it 100 times before. Not random, not hikers. They were searching. We packed in 10 minutes. No fire, no food, just essentials thrown into bags. Rich took us north, cutting cross slope instead of going down the usual path. We didn't stop until we hit the access road. It took over 3 hours. I tripped twice, scraped my arm on a thorn bush, didn't care. Once we got back to the truck, we drove in silence until we hit paved road. Then Rich lit a cigarette, first time I'd seen him smoke in years, and said, "Some places change." I didn't ask what he saw. I think I knew. Back home, I dug into forums, hunting boards, wilderness survival threads, even Reddit. I searched keywords like Ozark chanting, symbols on trees, valley figures. I found them, posts going back years, descriptions eerily close to what we experienced, people talking about symbols, strange groups, voices in the trees. The tone was always the same, not exaggerated, not paranormal, just scared, just quiet. Some mentioned locals who'd seen gatherings deep in the woods, always in remote spots, always without warning. A few posts mentioned park rangers refusing to investigate certain areas. One comment stuck with me. It said, "They're not trying to hide. They're just not interested in being seen by anyone who doesn't belong." And I don't. Neither did Rich. He told me he's done with that valley. 40 years of hunting memories, gone. "Not worth the risk," he said. "Whatever they're doing, it's older than any tree we've walked past." That trip rewired something in me. Not in a dramatic, movie ending kind of way, but in the way you suddenly avoid looking into dark rooms at night, in the way the forest feels heavier now, even in daylight. Some places aren't just wild, they're occupied, and if you stumble into the wrong part of them, they'll let you know. Or worse, they won't.